Something's happening to me.
In early 1995, a hiker went missing in the remote mountains of Central Oregon. After several sightings, some members of the isolated local community speculated that the missing man had contracted an animal-borne virus called Hill's fever. The indigenous people who came before called it something else: face of the wolf. At the beginning of the movie, Grady takes his son, Blake, hunting. However, Blake is distracted and not paying attention to what Grady is saying. Frustrated, Grady sternly tells him that while the place is beautiful, it is also dangerous, and survival depends on knowing exactly what to do. He explains that people can be taken from you in the blink of an eye, emphasizing that everyone is just inches away from death. He adds, "I won't always be around to watch over you, but I'll make damn sure you know how to survive." Just then, Blake notices something, and when Grady turns to look, he sees a deer. Grady quietly takes his position to hunt it, but the deer escapes his sight. Calling out to Blake, Grady turns to find that his son is no longer there. Meanwhile, Blake has moved to another location for a clearer view. He takes his position, waiting for the deer to reappear, but instead of the deer, he sees a strange creature that vanishes a moment later. Blake tries to spot it again, but instead he hears growling in the distance. Fear creeps in as he stands up, slowly stepping backward while the sounds of chittering and growling intensify. Suddenly, Grady arrives and scolds him, warning, "If you don't do what I say, you'll get hurt." Blake explains that he only wanted a better shot at the deer, to which Grady lets him go. But just then, rustling and chittering noises echo around them. Sensing danger, Grady scans the surroundings through his scope, but sees nothing, and alarmed, he tells Blake to climb up into the deer blind. Next, we see them hiding in the deer blind as Grady instructs Blake to cover his ears. Grady then takes his position, aiming his gun at the door when he hears the creature climbing the ladder to reach them. However, the creature suddenly stops, and after a brief silence, it starts trying to break down the door. Then, it stops again, but moments later, we see it's attempting to reach them from behind. However, hearing the sound of an animal, the creature jumps down and rushes toward the animal to hunt it. Grady looks out to check and sees a disemboweled deer in the distance. As he scans the area, he spots the creature and quickly fires at it, but it escapes and its howling echoes through the woods before fading away. Blake asks, "What was that?" To which Grady hesitantly says, "A bear." That night, Grady radios his friend Dan, saying he saw the face of the wolf and almost shot it. Dan questions the point of chasing something that doesn't want to be found, to which Grady says, "I was hunting by the river when it came after my boy." He adds, "I'm gonna get it, and you're coming with me," asking, "Don't you want to keep your boy safe?" 30 years later, Blake is married to Charlotte, and they have a daughter, Ginger. Blake tells Charlotte that he just received a letter that his father has officially been declared deceased by the state of Oregon. Charlotte offers her condolences and asks, "How do you feel?" To which Blake replies, "We knew this letter would come someday, but it's still shocking." Ginger asks, "Are you sad?" And Blake replies, "Yes," saying, "I wish I had known him better, but he always made me afraid of him. So as soon as I was old enough, I left." The next day, Blake asks Charlotte, "Is she happy?" And she replies, "Yes," and asks, "Why do you ask?" To which Blake replies, "Because I don't think we're doing well right now." He explains that receiving the letter made him realize that she and Ginger are the only family he has left. He says, "We have such little time with the people we love, and I just want us to enjoy each other and be happy as a family while we're here." He then suggests that you should come up to Oregon with me, as I have to pack up all my dad's things and load them into a truck. They can spend the whole summer there, and it'll be good for them. Charlotte says it sounds nice, but she can't just leave work, to which he responds that she can work remotely and spend some time with Ginger. Charlotte replies, "I don't even know if I'm good at spending time with Ginger anymore," saying she relates to you so much more than me, to which Blake reassures her, saying she is an incredible mother. Next, we see them on the way to Blake's dad's house, having a lot of fun. But Blake sees 2 roads ahead, and he stops the truck. Confused, he takes out his phone to check the map, only to find they have no service. Ginger looks around, spots a man, and points out that there's someone in the treehouse. The man approaches and asks, "Where are you guys headed?" To which Blake replies that he's looking for his dad's farm. The man asks, "Who's your dad?" And Blake says, "Grady." The man then says, "You've been gone a long time, Blake." And when Blake asks, "Do I know you?" the man responds, "I'm Derek, Dan's son." Blake remembers him and says, "It's good to see you." And Derek replies, "Not many of us left living up here anymore." Blake says, "I am sure this was my dad's driveway." To which Derek responds, "It's mine. And the usual road to Grady's is cut off, but I'll take you there and get you settled in quicker." Derek gets into the car, and Blake introduces him to Charlotte and Ginger. As they continue toward the farm, Derek tells Blake, "There are things you have to come to terms with up here." Charlotte responds, "We're pretty tough people." To which Derek turns to her and says, "To me, you don't seem so tough, but that's a good thing, and it means you've had a good life." He then asks Blake, "What do you do for a living?" To which Blake replies, "I'm a writer, but I'm between jobs right now." And Charlotte adds, "I'm a journalist." Derek smiles and says, "I bet you look at them every day and wonder how you got so lucky to have such a smart and beautiful family." To which Blake says, "I do." Suddenly, the werewolf appears on the road, and Blake swerves, losing control of the truck, which crashes into a ditch and gets stuck against a tree. When he regains consciousness, he checks on Charlotte and Ginger, who assure him they're okay. Derek opens the door and collapses to the ground, and Blake quickly tells Ginger to climb out through the window. Ginger and Charlotte scramble onto the truck, but then they hear a low, guttural growl. Blake, looking into the rearview mirror, sees the werewolf approaching, and he struggles to shut the door just as it lunges, but the werewolf smashes the window, and Blake watches in horror as it drags Derek away. Blake and his family flee, and he realizes they're close to his dad's house. Just as they spot it, the werewolf growls behind them, and they break into a sprint as the werewolf gains on them. They barely make it inside before it reaches them, and the beast slams against the door, trying to break through, but after some time, it finally stops. Blake grabs a flashlight and heads into the basement to turn on the electricity, and as he pulls the lever, the generator rumbles to life and the lights flicker on. Blake returns to his family, and a frightened Ginger tells him she wants to go home, to which he gently reassures her they will, but they can't go outside right now, so they have to wait until morning. Later, Blake apologizes to Ginger for what happened. He tells her, "It's my job to protect you, and I didn't. I put you through something very scary, and I'll never forgive myself if it leaves a mark on you." He pauses before continuing, "Sometimes, when you're a dad, you're so afraid of your kids getting scars that you end up becoming the thing that scars them." He then asks, "What am I thinking right now?" To which she places her hand on his forehead and softly says, "I love my little girl." Smiling, he replies, "You must be able to read minds because that's exactly what I was thinking." He then goes to Charlotte, who asks him what was it? To which Blake says it sounded like an animal, but I looked right at it when we almost hit it, and it was standing on 2 feet, like a person. He then places a cupboard against the door, and when Charlotte asks if it will hold, he replies, "Maybe," and suggests they try calling someone for help. He turns on his father's radio and tries to make contact, but no one responds. And after a while, he notices a weird smell. When he opens a door, he finds flesh hanging in the room, and meanwhile, Charlotte uses the radio to try to make contact. Blake comes out, telling her he found something to eat, his dad's jerky, but as he chews, his jaw starts hurting, and he assumes he must have hit it on the steering wheel. However, to his shock, his tooth breaks and falls out, prompting Charlotte to rush to check on him. She helps him sit down and notices a deep cut on his arm. Quickly, she pours hydrogen peroxide on it, causing him to wince, and he assumes he must have cut it on the truck's window. But she hesitates, saying it doesn't look like a glass injury. She then wraps a bandage around the wound, and he thanks her, asking her to keep trying the radio for him. Later, while Blake is drinking water, he hears a thumping sound and immediately becomes alert. Grabbing a hammer, he cautiously heads upstairs, following the noise until he realizes it's coming from a room. He carefully opens the door and steps inside to investigate, where he notices that the sounds are coming from inside the wardrobe. But when he approaches and opens it, he He finds no one inside. However, to his shock, he realizes the noise is coming from a spider crawling inside. Suddenly, he feels dizzy, his breathing growing rapidly, and after a moment, as he regains his composure, he hears distant howling from somewhere far away. Blake returns to his wife and daughter, but suddenly hears approaching footsteps and quickly signals Charlotte to stay quiet. Moving toward the window, he starts sniffing the air as someone passes by outside, and Charlotte watches in shock, unsettled by his strange behavior, as he stops near the door. Suddenly, the werewolf grabs Blake's leg, trying to drag him out, but Charlotte quickly picks up the hammer and strikes it, forcing it to let go. Grunting in pain, Blake moves away from the door, and after a while, he loses consciousness. After some time, when he wakes up, he comes out looking for his wife and daughter. However, he can only hear Charlotte's voice, and even that sounds faint and unclear. Following the voice, Blake makes his way to the basement, where he finds Ginger sleeping, and Charlotte is desperately trying to make contact on the radio, but her voice still sounds distorted to him. Charlotte is pleading for help, but when she gets no response, she throws the microphone in frustration. Just then, she hears Blake wheezing and turns to find him standing in the darkness behind her. He tries to speak as he steps into the light, but his words are unclear. Charlotte, visibly distressed, tells him she is so worried about him, but she doesn't know what to do. Blake loses control and urinates on himself, and seeing this, Charlotte says, "Let's get you upstairs." Charlotte brings him a pen and paper and asks if he can write down what's wrong. Blake grips the pen, struggling to write, but after a moment, he manages to scrawl, dying. Charlotte quickly reassures him he is just sick, but they are going to fix him. She tells him with determination that you're going to get better, because Ginger and I need you, and what I want to say is I love you. However, it is revealed that Blake can't hear her clearly, and his vision has become distorted. He asks Charlotte what is happening, telling her he can't understand her, and it is then revealed that she also can't understand what he is saying. Ginger asks what is happening to him, to which Charlotte calls her over and explains that Daddy isn't feeling well, but in the morning, they will take him to the doctor as soon as possible. Ginger asks, "Are you sick?" And just as he tries to respond, he notices blood on his hand. Charlotte quickly rolls up his shirt sleeves to check and tells Ginger to go to the next room. She then removes the bandage and is shocked by the condition of his arm. Suddenly, Blake gets up grunting and moves aside before frantically scratching his arm, and Charlotte watches in terror as he starts devouring his flesh, his teeth loosening and falling out as he chews. He then stops, gets up, and looks at Charlotte, who is frozen in horror, and without a word, he quietly walks away. Charlotte quietly moves toward the window and sees a car outside, and without hesitation, she rushes to the basement to grab the keys and a battery. The three of them approach the car, and Charlotte helps him into the back seat. But as she secures Ginger inside, a distant howl echoes through the night. Charlotte opens the hood to jumpstart the car, while Ginger watches her father, who has begun to transform. Charlotte hurries back to the driver's seat, turns the key, and the engine whirs but fails to start. She tries again, and after several attempts, the car finally roars to life. She quickly rushes out to disconnect the battery, and then returns to the car. But before they can leave, the werewolf suddenly appears on the hood. It smashes the windshield and then breaks the gear lever. Desperate, Charlotte attacks it with a knife, and then the three of them quickly escape from the car and run toward a greenhouse. The werewolf rushes towards them, but they manage to climb onto the greenhouse, narrowly escaping its reach. The werewolf enters the greenhouse, and after some time, because of their weight, the tent pins start coming off. The werewolf jumps in an attempt to reach them, and after some unsuccessful attempts, it manages to make several cuts on the tent with its claws. Scared, Ginger attempts to reach her mom, but she falls from a cut and hangs. However, they manage to pull her just in time. Blake signals them to go to the house, and he jumps out of the tent to distract the werewolf. Charlotte and Ginger run towards the house, and as Charlotte opens the door, Ginger hears growling from a distance, and they quickly enter the house and shut the door. She tells Charlotte that Daddy is outside and will get hurt, to which Charlotte explains he was trying to protect her, and only then do they hear huffing from outside. Charlotte tells Ginger to stay back and cautiously approaches the window to check. Ginger asks, "Is it Daddy?" insisting that he's sick and needs their help. Despite her fear, Charlotte opens the door for Blake and watches in terror as he steps inside. Ginger approaches him and, placing her hand on his forehead, asks, "What am I thinking right now?" He tries to speak, and she answers, "I was thinking that I love you." She then asks, "Can you hear me?" But he is unable to respond, and she softly tells him, "I love you so much." As she removes her hand, Blake suddenly starts gasping, and his nails fall apart before he vomits blood, causing Ginger to scream in terror. Blake picks up a severed finger, then looks up at them before lunging and cornering Charlotte against a wall. At first, Charlotte is terrified, but then she looks straight into his eyes, causing Blake to unexpectedly calm down and step aside. Just as he opens the door to leave, a werewolf suddenly lunges at him, attacking viciously. It pins him to the floor, but Charlotte stabs it, forcing it to turn to her. She runs with Ginger and locks her in a room, and as the werewolf charges at her, Blake intervenes. The beast slams him against the wall, before hurling him across the hallway, and then it pushes him towards the cupboard, before knocking him out. It then begins to drag Blake away, but gets distracted by Ginger's voice, and Charlotte strikes it with an iron rod. Before it can retaliate, Blake lunges at the werewolf, pushing him away, and Charlotte watches in horror as he sinks his teeth into its throat, killing it. However, as Blake catches his breath, his eyes fall on a tattoo on Werewolf's arm, and he realizes it was his father. Blake staggers outside and collapses as his transformation continues. His nails crumble, replaced by sharp claws. He then rises as a fully transformed werewolf, and his howl pierces the night. Meanwhile, the lights in the house go out. Charlotte gets up and cautiously walks toward the window to check outside. And to her horror, she sees Blake fully transformed into a werewolf before he suddenly runs away. As Charlotte backs away, a sudden crashing sound startles them. Blake is seen quietly descending the stairs, and the creaking wood catches their attention. Charlotte picks up a knife from the floor and cautiously moves toward the stairs to investigate. But Blake is nowhere in sight, and as she steps back, he is revealed sitting behind Ginger. Charlotte screams in terror and quickly rushes to protect Ginger, and as Blake moves toward them, Charlotte strikes him with the knife. Enraged, he snatches it from her, giving Charlotte and Ginger a chance to escape the house. They hide inside a barn, where Charlotte finds a torch and a chain. Moments later, Blake arrives and tries to open the gate, but finding it locked, he begins digging beneath it to squeeze inside, but suddenly stops. However, the next moment, he is revealed sitting in the darkness right in front of them, his sharp eyes fixed on them. As he moves closer, his leg gets caught in a trap, and Charlotte and Ginger scream in terror and flee. While he watches them escape, they sprint into the woods, desperate to escape, and meanwhile, Blake bites off his own leg to free himself from the trap. Blake chases them into the woods, his fury growing. Enraged, he leaps onto a rock and lets out a thunderous roar, echoing through the night. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Ginger find Derek's severed hand, and as they look around, Charlotte spots their truck. She starts searching for Derek's gun, and during this, Ginger hears Blake snarling and warns her mother that he's coming. Charlotte finds the gun, but before they can react, they hear a noise from above the truck, and spotting Blake there, they flee. They both hide in the deer blind, and we see Blake approaching it. They then hear him climbing the stairs, and as he reaches the top, Charlotte aims the gun at him and stands up. However, she hesitates when he appears. He then turns to Ginger, who gets up in fear, but soon realizes he's trying to say something. She tells her mother that he wants it to be over, and as he opens the gate, Charlotte shoots him. As Blake takes his final breaths, Charlotte and Ginger approach him. Ginger places her hand on his forehead for a moment, before pulling it away, and moments later, Blake slowly dies. As the sun rises, Charlotte and Ginger walk out into the valley near the farm, and the movie ends here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.